They say time heals all wounds, but what do you do when the clock seems to have stopped? When every tick reminds you of the betrayal that shattered your world? This is the story of a man whose love was tested in the most excruciating way, a story of heartache, hope, and the relentless struggle to find peace in the aftermath of infidelity. A year ago, my world fell apart. After 14 years together, 4 of them married, I thought I knew the woman I loved. We had built a life together, a life that included our beautiful 2.5-year-old daughter and dreams of expanding our family. We were even trying for a second child, a hope that brought me joy amid the everyday chaos of work, parenting, and life's little challenges. But in May 2023, the life I knew crumbled. My wife, the woman I had vowed to spend forever with, met someone at her job. At first, it was innocent, just coworkers exchanging messages. But those messages quickly became something more, something darker. They began sexting, sharing intimate thoughts and desires that should have been reserved for us alone. It was the kind of betrayal I never imagined would happen to me. I trusted her implicitly, and in return, she shattered that trust. I only learned about the affair by accident, a random glance at her Google Maps timeline. It was like a punch to the gut, the kind that leaves you gasping for air, wondering if you'll ever breathe normally again. The timeline revealed meetings, 5 in total. My heart sank further when she confessed that they had been physically intimate twice. Twice! How can something so life-altering be reduced to such a small number? But even that felt like a lie, like there was so much more hidden beneath the surface. When I confronted her, she admitted to the affair but refused to give me the full details. I pleaded with her to be honest, to help me understand how and why this happened. But she shut down, refusing to talk about it any further. It was like trying to stitch up a wound without knowing how deep it really went. The pain was unbearable, but what hurt more was the uncertainty, the not knowing what else she was keeping from me. We tried couples therapy. I wanted to believe that we could work through this, that our love was strong enough to survive even this. But therapy felt like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. We went through the motions, but the trust was gone, replaced by a chasm of doubt and fear. My wife seemed distant, unwilling, or unable to fully commit to the healing process. I, too, was struggling, haunted by the images and thoughts of her with someone else. The physical aspect of their affair tormented me daily, invading my thoughts and turning my dreams into nightmares. Months passed, and nothing seemed to change. The nightmares continued, and the weight of the affair hung over our marriage like a storm cloud that refused to break. Every day was a battle, to get out of bed, to go to work, to care for our children. Our daughter, so innocent and unaware of the turmoil at home, was my only source of light. But even my love for her couldn't drown out the darkness that was consuming me. In November, our son was born. I'll admit, I had doubts, terrible, gnawing doubts about whether he was mine. The thought of it tore me apart, so I took a paternity test. When the results came back, confirming that he was indeed my son, I felt a momentary relief. But it was fleeting, overshadowed by the unresolved pain of my wife's infidelity. My mental health deteriorated as the months dragged on. I became irritable, withdrawn, and struggled to focus on anything other than the betrayal. My work suffered, my relationships with friends and family became strained, and I found myself snapping at my children for the smallest things. I was spiraling, and I didn't know how to stop it. A year has passed since I discovered the affair, and I still feel stuck in that moment. The betrayal, the lies, the unanswered questions, they've all left scars that haven't healed. I'm trying to forgive, to move forward, but how do you forgive when you don't have the whole truth? How do you rebuild a marriage when the foundation is cracked and crumbling? I want to believe that there's hope for us, that we can somehow find our way back to each other. But every day feels like a new test, and I'm not sure how many more I can take. My psychologist tells me that the only way forward is through forgiveness and acceptance, but those words feel hollow when I'm still haunted by what happened. I'm sharing my story here because I need to know that I'm not alone. I need to hear from others who have been through this, who have felt the same pain, the same anger, the same despair. Did you survive? Did your marriage survive? Or did you find peace by letting go? If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Sharing this has been harder than I expected, but I hope that by putting it out there, I can begin to find some semblance of peace. I don't know what the future holds for my marriage, but I do know that I can't keep living in the past. But before you go, we have another story that might intrigue you, one of heartbreak, redemption, and an unexpected happily ever after. A man who goes to his cheating ex-wife only to find love in the most unexpected place, his child's nanny. Trust me, you won't want to miss this tale of true love rising from the ashes of betrayal. I really struggled about making this post because my divorce is still a great source of anger at times. Not much as it used to be, but it really triggers my negative brain. But my therapist told me that it helps to write a journal. My ex-wife and I had a 2-year relationship. We had our son before we married, and I tried really hard to be a good husband and a father. Starting as an introvert meant that I really had to start from scratch, but I can honestly say I did my best to learn. My ex and I were total opposites. And maybe opposites attracted in the beginning, but then we started to butt heads a lot. My ex-wife, I learned, hated to compromise and would use bullying and gaslighting tactics to get her way. She was a spender and wanted to splurge on things because she thought that she deserved it. Looking bad, she wasn't really a good mom or wife. She was very self-centered and spent more time on her phone than with me or my son. I took care of everything, including my son's hospital and etc. And she didn't want any more responsibility. While I was being burnt out from all the work and responsibilities. The last straw was when she was cheating on me with her ex. Both of us knew that infidelity was not acceptable from the beginning and a deal breaker. As soon as I learned, I knew that I needed to leave or start a fight. So I carefully planned how I was going to leave. I found a house to rent 2 hours away from where we were. I work remotely, so that wasn't an issue. Removed myself from the apartment lease and all of the utilities, removed myself from the joint account that we had, and moved while my wife went to leave for some facial therapy. Before I left with her divorce papers with copies of evidence that I also sent to her family members exactly at the same time the moving company, and I left our old apartment. I blocked her on everything I could. Basically, I left everything in 6 hours. After I moved everything into my new place, I was bombarded by texts and calls from her side of the family. Mostly I got apologies from her cousins since they knew from the beginning what might happen. Her mom apologized a lot, saying that she didn't raise her daughter well, and both her and my ex's aunt begged me to reconsider the divorce. Then I started getting messages of threats and insults from my ex at a different number. I just kept blocking those, but it got so bad that I just got a new phone. The divorce was slightly rough because of my ex. My ex tried to say that I kidnapped my son and tried to sue me. But I presented all the facts, that I was the one solely responsible for everything at home and for our son's health, speech therapy, etc. The judge was surprisingly understanding and said that since I was the primary care provider for my son, he dismissed my ex's claim. And then I present all of the evidence of my ex's infidelity, including all the money she spent. I even got the AP to confess. Long story short, the AP still lived with his parents, and I threatened to sue him for alienation of affection unless he confessed. It was a long shot TBH, but he caved in. Because of all the evidence, I was given almost all of my money. I just had to pay my ex a little bit of alimony for a year since she quit her work. And during custody, I was rewarded primary custody with my ex getting supervised visitation. She only got that because of all the threatening messages that she sent me. She literally shot herself in the foot. It was so bad for her because I now live 2 hours away from her by car, and she couldn't drive. So she didn't even visit my son for months until she got her cousin to drive her. I really realized how bad it was only until after I started living by myself and my son. I felt like a huge weight was off of my shoulders and I felt at peace with myself. So I decided to make best of this change. I still worked at home, and because of my son's autism, I was able to get a care provider to care for my son and get an ABA therapist to help his therapy at home. It was so much better that I can't describe in words. My ex shifted tactics after a few months of seeing my son, saying that she regretted her actions and wanted to be a better person for me and my son. But I wasn't having it. One time she came with her luggage and tried to move in. But I refused and called the cops. Everything from gaslighting to crying and everything to get her way again. So I told her to never come back. I even got the judge to deny her visitation since she tried to force her way into moving in a few times. She then started love bombing me with texts. She even got her mom and aunt to help her, but since that was still with my old phone, I just ended up giving it up to a cell phone disposal for a chunk of change. Then about one school year passed, and my son's care provider and I got really close. She was very sweet and gentle, so much different my ex. She was so helpful and thoughtful, and so positive. But she was 11 years younger than me. Back then I was 30 and she was 19, going to nursing school. So I didn't make any advances. But one day, when my son was down for his nap, she cooked for me a wonderful meal and we ate together. And she confessed being attracted to me. She told me that she wanted to date me for real. I initially thought that it wasn't going to be that smooth since respite care providers have rules about fraternization and getting close with clients. And the age gap was certainly an issue. But she said that she would quit her provider work if she had to. I told her I needed time to think and process. My divorce really had shattered my desire to date anyone, but I was so attracted to her. So I told her that I would like to do this slowly and properly. And 4 years of dating and her graduating and becoming a full-time nurse, we tied the knot. I learned from my past mistakes and decided to be a much better husband to her. And thanks to her vivaciousness, that wasn't hard to do. My son even calls her now. In fact, the first time he did that was when I knew that I had to marry her. And I admit I took the relationship very slowly because I wanted to be careful. Strangely enough, I am still close with my ex's cousins. They are all old school, and while they care for my ex, they respect me even more and always ask about my son and how I am doing. All of them are either firefighters and military, so they don't play. They even invite my family and I to vacation with them. And now the sore portion that still makes me angry, my ex. She somehow found out my wife a few years back and confronted her at her freaking nurse school. That really scared my now wife, and I nearly punched her when I came to break up the situation. My now wife and I filed more restraining orders against her. And now my ex is now not allowed to be anywhere near my family, even our son. She can only video chat with him now, or have supervised visitation in a place of our choosing. After our divorce finalized, she returned back to work and got herself living alone. Over the years, she tried to get her cousins to convince me to help her, but they just straight up refused. Even her mom and aunt gave her up. Our last talk with each other, she told me what she could have done to gotten me back, and I jokingly said that she would have to join the military to learn some discipline. And she actually did join. Only to be kicked out for some disciplinary reason or something. Now she is just passive-aggressive, posting on social media about forgiveness, second chances, and how modern women are victims. And some of her followers actually believe her lies. My currently wife told me not to worry about it. She is so kind and understanding, knowing that I have so many trust issues and such. We are planning to have our first child together soon, and I want to do things better this time. I guess the moral of the story that I want to tell every betrayed man is there is always someone who will love and respect you more than your current spouse. Don't settle for anything less.